Hey, how you
Hello.
doing?
I'm good and you?
I'm doing well. The
Nice to
phone was right in my
finally.
face.
I must say, you kept time. You kept time.
Yes.
You're actually like, I'm ready. I'm like, this is so professional. Like, honestly,
As we should be, right?
honestly, that's amazing. I'm so glad you kept time. We're starting on time. We're going to engage. So they'll keep coming in. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. How's my audio? Is my audio good? Can you hear
It's
me good?
perfect. It's
All right,
perfect.
cool. My
Yeah.
name is Mario Reyes. I'm also known by my stage name as Poppy Picasso. I am a spoken word artist headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. However, more so than that, I'm also an author of A Son with No Father is a book with no author. That was my first contribution to the literary world. I also own a nonprofit organization called Manifest Destiny, in which we bring art to underserved communities.
Beautiful. Nice. Like you've been practicing this, you know it so well. Like, that's what
How
I
about
do.
you? I
Yeah.
know me. A
um,
proud descendant of the Bronx, New York, as my family on here knows.
oh, sorry, I didn't get that. Can you say that again?
I said I am a proud. My origins are from the Bronx, New York.
Oh, oh, oh,
Yeah,
oh,
you know, the
oh, oh.
birthplace of hip hop. Yeah,
I'm like, I'm thinking, okay, where is that? What is, I'm clueless.
yeah.
But I know a lot of people get what you're saying. I'm
That's
just a
where
little bit,
Cardi B is from,
oh, okay,
and
okay.
Fat Joe, and a lot of other artists. That's like literally the birthplace of hip hop.
So there's a lot of artistry in that place because we tend to be more artistic. We're very artistic, very
Yes.
creative. Wow.
Yeah, I grew up doing all like anybody that knows me when I was a kid, they'll tell you I used to break dance, I did graffiti, I used to rap, I was in theater.
Mm,
So
it's
just
your
the
thing.
nature of that community, because it's an immigrant community. A lot of Caribbean folks. You got Puerto Rican, Dominican, Haitian, Jamaican, all types of West Indian, and then you got a heavy African population. Then you
Yeah.
got a heavy Italian population, Irish. So with all
Where,
of this
where, where
big
do
mix
you
up,
fit in? Where do you fit in terms of origins? If you trace your origins, are you more, you have a bit of African or more Italian, or where are
so
you?
when I traced, I did 23andMe, and I was 40% Mozambican. Yes. Then after that, it was 20 something percent native. So whether it be, Taino, it's part of the Taino Indian population. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
also Portuguese. It was Portuguese. It wasn't Spanish. It was
Oh,
Portuguese. Yeah.
wow. So interesting, hey? It's so interesting how human beings are so dynamic and complex. And
Yeah.
yeah, honestly.
Honestly,
So
I love being a mashup. When
yeah,
all cultures collide, that's when you see beautiful births.
wow. Yeah, that's amazing, hey? And just being able to connect to that original idea, and at the same time understanding your own complexities and knowing that there's something bigger than all of this,
Very
someone
much
bigger
so.
than all of what we are even imagining, greater than
Yeah.
what we can comprehend. That is mind-blowing. Okay. So we are in South Africa. I'm specifically in around Pretoria. Do you know a
And,
bit about South Africa?
I'm getting familiar with it. In speaking with you, I did a little bit of research, and then what we know, like historically, about
Yeah,
apartheid and things of that nature.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So South Africa, apartheid was a real thing. So the former structures are gone-ish, but obviously not disappeared. So
Hmm.
you still get traces of those operational structures, and keeping in mind the generational impact. So it doesn't disappear just because it's been declared over. So
Hmm.
we still have a lot of traits of being oppressed. It's a real thing here because we're like 28, if I'm not mistaken. How many years? 28 years in democracy. So it's still a young democracy.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's very that's something that South America and South Africa and what North America have in common is that, you know, whether it be the abolition of slavery and the institutionalized racism that has been in place, we tend to think just because the overt oppression is over, that all of it has now evaporated, and that's not the truth. You know,
It doesn't. It
it
doesn't.
requires constant monitoring,
Yeah.
constant fighting and resistance of those structures. You know, if we
Yeah.
care to be integrated, yes. If
Yeah.
you want to just go somewhere else and start a new nation, there are going to be
Yeah.
people there too. You know?
Yeah. No, that's the reality. So with your research, you found out that there was apartheid.
Mhm.
What else did you discover about South Africa?
Just a lot of the one thing that kind of like struck me is like how vibrant it is, like musically.
Yeah.
And then I started getting reached out by a couple of artists out there that want to do like a big concert series, and they're looking for like some American artists to come out and share as well. So I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of unique. I wasn't familiar, but then again, I should know better because they say need is the mother of all invention and pain is
Yeah.
the father of all art. So
Yeah.
pain being the father of all art, I think, and knowing the history or being familiar with the
Yeah.
history in South Africa, I think I could definitely see that being a hub.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's worth, because at this stage the whole world is open to communicate, and there's a big need to belong, to fit in, to reach out and form, you know, those relationships. Anyway, I mean, look at this. We are talking. We've never physically met,
Hmm.
but we just connect. Like, okay, Leon, let's talk. Just like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's a
I
beautiful
mean,
thing.
it's beautiful. You understand? It's beautiful to be able to recognize somebody's uniqueness, what makes them stand out, and connect to it. Because remember, you don't connect to everyone. I don't connect to everyone. But to be able to connect to those that connect with you
Hmm.
and start talking, that's what it's about, literally.
Yeah, I spent 6 years in the military, and
Oh,
in my travels, you know, being exposed to all of the various different cultures, you know, going to Asia, going to South America, just traveling all in all, I realized that everybody pretty much has the same, we care about the same things.
yeah,
You know,
basically. Yeah,
and there's more beauty to be found in our commonality than there is to argue about our differences. And when you are somebody that recognizes that early on, it kind of helps you be a citizen of the world.
yeah,
Like my mother told me a long time ago that I never met a stranger. I'm a pretty happy person. I kind of walk around smiling a lot. I'll introduce
yeah,
myself. So
yeah,
since I've never met a stranger, I feel like it's only right to, you know, anybody that extends their hand, compliment that. You know, shake it.
yeah, yeah. Is the best way. And you'll experience peace, because you're not resisting life.
Hmm.
You're living life and you're going with the flow. It's just easier compared to being defensive all the time, not trusting all the time. It just makes life a bit more harder. So I'm really enjoying our conversation, but I'm thinking we should talk about your book now.
Okay. Okay. Um,
So the title of your book, why that title?
well, see that the title came. I was in Baltimore at the time. I used to live in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a northern city in America,
Yeah.
and it was. I was sitting there like I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in America, the barber shop is such a cultural hub for
Yeah. Yeah.
black commerce, black camaraderie. So you go to the barber shop and you can stay there for hours before you get your hair cut, after you get your hair cut, laughing, joking, and just building, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So me and my barber, shout out to Six, he's, you know, it's my brother right there.
Yeah.
So, and a real good guy, like a very present father, very active in his community. So I'm over there and I watched him give at least 6 children fatherly advice.
Yeah.
And it caught me off guard because when I sat down, I was like, hey, look at you being everybody's dad, like making a joke out of it. And he was like,
Yeah.
seriously, none of their fathers are around. And it was due to incarceration. It was due
Mario, I
to,
just want to read this. I want to read this. I just missed it, but someone is saying the book super dope,
oh,
talking about
I
your book.
appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shout out to Kamal. That's my brother right there too. And
Oh, okay.
pretty much, he was telling me like everybody was either locked up or in jail or dead or was on some like with the streets. They were dealing in the streets, so their priorities were messed up. And it just hit me. And so I came up with a line. And the line was a son with no,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm the poet, right? So a son with no father is a book with no author. A main
Mm.
character that's been developed by his peers and his barber. And I put that as a punchline in a poem that I wrote. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes some lines and some art that you write, you realize that you ain't right there. You are a conduit for God. And God
Yeah.
is trying to explain something.
Yeah.
So when I took that and made a whole poem called The Son with No Father is a Book with No Author. And for some reason, of all the poems I've written, I got at least, I'm not even lying, I probably got at least 1,000 poems.
Sure.
Um, and of all of those, that title and that poem kept sticking out to me because it spoke so much to what I do on a daily basis. My activity, where my priorities lie. I was a single father when I wrote that, so you have kind of have to wrestle with the stereotypes of what single fathers are, if they're present at all. Can they nurture a daughter? Are they toxic on their sons? All of these stereotypes. So people were pushing me and asking me if I was ever going to write a book. And I
Mm.
decided if I'm ever going to write one, it should reflect what my life is truly about. And my life being about fatherhood.
Mm.
A Son with No Father is a book with no author just made sense.
Yeah.
And I knew that title is kind of like a gut punch, and it will
Yeah.
get people talking. Like, it's not a title that you're soon to forget. It'll make you think. It'll make you at least pick up the book and wonder, what was he saying?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do and I talk about a lot is I can understand how that title could be received offensively. A Son with No Father is a book with no author.
Mm.
However, I always let people know a masterpiece is a masterpiece, whether you know who wrote it or not. If you picked up Hamlet
Mm.
today and started reading it, the content doesn't change.
Mm.
The only thing that I'm saying is it's reading a book without a preface, reading a book without a table of contents, and that's what
Mm.
fathers are supposed to provide. We're supposed to
Yeah.
provide the structure, but I still want my son to fill in the pages himself.
Yeah.
So the title in itself, honestly, is kind of dope because it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
While you're reading the book, you're realizing that this father has written a book about his son, and it's showing, not just telling.
Yeah. So I'm interested to know, in your case, you were a single father at that time when you're writing the book. So how did you do it, being a single father, taking care of your kids?
Um, I'm like, I do it the way everybody. Like, it's not. You could tell where a man's priorities are based
Yeah,
on where he spends his money and his time.
of course.
So if you are somebody that is family orientated, then picking up the kids from school and dropping them off and making sure dinner's ready, and in the early stages bathing them and wiping, like, that's what you're supposed to do. It's just part
Yeah,
of your natural life. Whereas if your priorities are different, if they're about being seen, if they're about entertainment, if they're about distracting yourself from any like pain you might have had in the past, then that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah,
Somebody's going to get the short end of the stick. And I'd rather neglect myself than ever neglect my obligations and responsibilities.
Yeah. But keep in mind, like what you mentioned earlier, just you being at the barber shop on the day, you noticed how many kids that were coming in were without their fathers for
Yeah.
different reasons. It's such a big thing worldwide. We know that for sure. So in your case, or in case of a father like you who says, I'm going to commit to my responsibilities, these kids are brought here by me. I contributed to make sure these kids are here. So I'm going to make sure that they're protected, they're safe, they get all the basics that needs to be done. What makes you different from the man who has neglected his role in your understanding? Why was it in you to do the right thing, and for someone else they can't do it? Are you aware maybe what makes it different for different men to be present or not present?
Yeah, I think I'm very careful when I cast a wide net, because there's a line that says blanket statements don't fit every mattress. So because everybody's situation is different, i.e., I got family members whose fathers chose not to be there. And some people may see the opposition with the mother and the relationship with their child's mother to be such a big hurdle, they're not going to engage with their children. And for those kind of people, I think that they're if they consider themselves warriors, they're definitely fighting the wrong fight.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
which is a struggle for many adults, honestly.
mhm. And it's a shame that children have to suffer based on the sins of their parents. And for other people, we got to, like we were talking earlier about apartheid and even the discrimination in America's system. A lot of my family and my friends had fathers that were in jail during the 80s, when the laws were unfairly prosecuting and criminalizing drug addiction, as opposed to treating it like a disease the way they're treating the opioid crisis. So I also recognize that a lot of this is systematic, and it's designed to ensure that the presence and examples of a strong father are removed from the family structure, and then they vilify you because there's I know I'm full of like idioms, right? I got a fortune cookie one time that said, society prepares the crime, the criminal commits it.
Mm.
Now, when I think of that, I think specifically about what we were just talking about, as far as society set up, put in place a system that vilified and criminalized Black culture to remove them. But guess
Yeah.
what? Just because you call somebody a criminal doesn't make them a criminal.
Yeah.
But you will be held accountable. Only
Yes.
the individual is held accountable. You'll never see the system be held accountable unless it's by, war, like real means, like the
Yeah.
Civil War and
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature.
Yeah. So I think you're also saying that eventually it comes down to personal choices, personal accountabilities, because
That
it
that
will.
word right there is key.
Yeah.
Accountability
Yeah.
is the definition of what manhood is. Until you're
Mm.
able to be accountable, you can't call yourself a man.
Yeah. And what you're saying is absolutely true, in every sense. But like you've acknowledged, it's a systematic problem. It's a systematic problem, meaning this was intentionally created to discredit the father figure
Mm-hmm.
and position, men that are really the healthy masculine as, is everybody so confused now that this word masculine is almost like toxicity in every way, to a point that
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to differentiate what is this masculinity that we're talking about, healthy, unhealthy. We just say
I
everything is
literally
toxic.
have a shirt.
Toxic. Yeah.
I have a shirt that says masculinity is not a dirty word.
But now it's been made to be so dirty, and it serves the interest of those that benefit from lack of structures or lack of support of structures for family, because everybody just despises the word without entertaining what it actually means. The accountability for protection, for provision, right?
Very much. I
It's like,
agree.
no,
Yeah.
just leave that, this is bad, bad, bad. We don't want. So now we pro like, no, every man should be feminine and every woman now should be masculine. So it's confusing everyone. And then we as women are moving out of our places and we feel bad for being feminine because it looks like it's weakness. And men are avoiding being masculine, healthy masculinity for that matter, because they don't want to come across to women as if, you know, they are not the right types of males. But from a bigger perspective, is that this is a structural thing. It's intentional, and it's being supported intentionally because there is an understanding that if we reinstate the family structures and actually get the men and the women to raise those kids and be present and give those kids the building blocks, the future is different, because
Yeah, the
those kids,
balance. They're set up to achieve greater things.
that's it. And there is a reason why there is a man and a woman. There is a reason why I was explaining to one of my patients today about, you know, even as a female, you have testosterone, which we all associate with masculinity. So the reality is a man has a bit of femininity and a woman has a bit of masculinity. And that's what makes us to be functional, because you can relate on different levels. So none of it is bad. It's the ratios that makes it good or bad or functional, at
I
least.
have a introduction to a poem in which I said, man, that's a word thrown around loosely without being properly defined. Man, in the face of adversity defies. Man, in the face of hardship survives. Man, in the face of love confides. Man, in the face of his children provides. So let's stop calling these little boys men until their actions comply. That's one reason why we find ourselves at a point where men are overconfident but underqualified. Good for a compliment, but not the quality time. See, like when we start talking about the family structure, it's done nothing but suffer in the absence of a man. You know, boys extend their adolescence in the absence of a man. Women have to become masculine in the absence of a man. So when you have that absence of what needs to be present, you could see a woman should be able to see in the value of a man in the things that she doesn't like doing herself. Meaning, I have to assume these responsibilities reluctantly.
Yeah.
So that shows where the value of the man does come from.
Yeah.
And I believe that when I talk about the extended adolescence, a lot of these men are men only in age, but they're not men in action. Like I look at them as warriors that are lost because they don't know what to fight for anymore. If you don't know what you're fighting for, if you're fighting for a principle that is based on falsehood, you are a victim, my brother. And you can't call yourself a man. You have to do the knowledge. You have to gain your own wisdom to be able to assert yourself without being aggressive. You got to be able to take your seat at the head of the table without oppressing and suppressing those that are under you. I think we confuse aggressiveness with leadership too much.
Yeah, and it's a problem for both sexes, because even for women, we find that sometimes we assume now we have to prove to the men that we can do what they can do. So we are forced to be aggressive unnecessarily because we are proving a point. Remember, the whole women empowerment is a big deal everywhere. So you are forced to be less feminine and defend your position as a woman, as someone who can do what a man can do. I can produce like you. I can do what you can do. So we lose that essence of what makes us females, because we assume that when you feminine, but you use the keyword assertion, being assertive. There's a huge difference between assertion and aggression. And people are confusing that thing right there. So being assertive is good, is healthy, is functional, is sustainable. But being aggressive is something else. So now with what you're saying, which I totally agree with, it goes back to why are this men that we're referring to in terms of just not taking the responsibility and being accountable for the decisions that they've made, where does that come from? And we know science has proven that every adult is a producer of their own childhood. So it goes back to saying what happened in your childhood.
Listen, I've been in therapy for 3 years now. For both my military service, and then, as you said, it always ends up going back to childhood and these unresolved issues. And I've written a lot of poetry lately as it pertains to therapy. And when people feel as if they were robbed for some reason in their childhood, when they feel as if they weren't protected, you either have one of two very extreme responses. Like, I know a lot of people that grew up without a father that are the best dads in the world right now, because they looked at what they went through and they empathized that they would never subject their child to that. Then you got people that are like, well, I was able to survive, now they have to.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You know, and when you start trying, it's not until you do the internal healing for yourself that everything else falls into place, because you realize life is not a challenge. You know, when you have these unresolved issues and these complexes that typically stem from childhood, you approach everything as if it's meant to be some kind of huge combat. It's not.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's not. Well, I don't like the contention. Like, we could all work in concert.
Yeah. 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 And you know what we're discussing is such a big issue. It's so big, and we also have to contextualize why we have such a big problem of this. I mean, like, we're talking about apartheid and the slavery. So basically it's the same thing. Between the slavery and the apartheid, it's basically the same thing. Just that power that was exercised to make sure that you separate men from their families, and you institutionalize it so that it almost looked normal, like this is how it's going to be. You guys, that's how it's going to happen now. You need to make sure that you go to work, you serve, and you'll see your family whenever you see your family, but we need service here. And it was so well structured, and it went on and on and on and on for the longest time. That's why we're saying that, you know, the reality is we're still going to go through this for so many more generations to come, because just with one pregnancy, you're carrying 2 more generations, because the one who is pregnant is carrying a child who has eggs of children that she will have in the future. So this is a multi-generational impact. So that's why, like we're saying, even if the structures have been formally removed, the impact continues on and on, because for most of us, we'll never understand why we behave in certain ways until we go back and try to see what has happened in my lineage, to try to pick up that, okay, this is repeating itself, and I don't like it, or I like it, right? Because sometimes you like what happened before. If you are blessed to have, you know, present parents, family structures, beautiful childhood, that is beautiful, and that is something that you want to carry on producing. But sometimes you realize that, look, in my lineage, everybody's getting divorced. Everyone ends up in single parenthood. Everyone is an alcoholic. So those are things that's why we need the consciousness
Yeah,
Is it
I host workshops in
yeah,
Atlanta. They're father-son workshops, and I
yeah,
also host like workshops with other brothers. And in it, we talk heavily about putting a period where the comma and generational trauma exists. I'll give you an example. My grandfather was an avid alcoholic, and I remember my father wrestling with alcoholism, and my sister and I had a conversation with him at our young age and let him know that this could potentially destroy our family, because if it comes down to it, we're going with mommy and we don't want to deal with you no more, right? And he made the decision to abstain from liquor for the most part. Like, he'll still drink, but it wasn't every day. It wasn't. He wasn't being aggressive and just mean.
yeah,
Whereas, and I saw that even in myself.
yeah,
So I made sure I abstain from drinking when I'm at home. I only will drink if I'm on a vacation.
yeah,
And, you know, a lot of times we inadvertently duplicate what we condemn prior, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I don't know what it is about the human experience that makes us do that.
yeah,
However, it's very painful. It just seems easier to absolve ourselves with
yeah.
distraction as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to dealing with it and being faced to recognize, like, hey, that branch that you may be from is broken.
Yeah. Well, from a scientific point of view, from when a child is being conceived during the pregnancy, throughout the pregnancy, delivery, all the way up to the 6, 7 years, that's when the programming happens. So programming happens through the environment. So ideally, the mother and the father influence the child's environment, and whatever environment that they create, that becomes the reality and a set point for a
Mm-hmm.
child. So now this is assuming that both parents are present and both parents are intentional, both parents are conscious, which is not the case for many people. So we tend to, during that time, you passively you get programmed into your subconsciousness
Mm-hmm.
because of a certain wavelength that you have, that your brain is operating at. Once you're older, you just produce what was already programmed. That's why it comes more naturally. You're drawn to that. Excuse
Wow.
me. Okay. The devil is a liar. Joking.
All right.
People usually say that, yeah. So now what happens with the programming that becomes our subconscious mind. So now with the subconscious mind, it means that you don't have to think about it or choose it. It just starts playing out what was programmed.
Yeah.
You don't have to choose. Now, fortunately, though, when you're older and you realize that your programming, which you see with the circumstances around your life and the decisions that you're drawn to, the type of people that you're drawn to, if you don't like it, you are able to change it and say, I don't want to go through this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can't erase the programming that already happened in the first 6, 7 years of your life. But you can consciously and through repetitive actions force your brain to learn a new habit. So it's only through the programming or repeated repetition of habits when you're an adult. But like you say, it's harder to do the work because the ego, which is what protects us,
Oh, ego's the
it,
enemy.
yeah, because the ego doesn't want you to move from what it knows, and it wants to protect you, but it's in the interest of the ego, because once the ego is in place, you are not willing to work on yourself and let go of some of the things that you believe in. So
Mm.
it always stands in the way. But if you are able to say, look, this is where I am and I don't like where I am, I'm going to accept this to myself and start working on it. And it's hard work. The ego doesn't want us to do any work. It
I
doesn't
would
want it
like
to
to
be too much.
share my
Yeah.
poem, my therapy poem, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Of course, it's fine.
Now, this is me letting go of my childhood hurt. And this is that very same pain bouncing back into my life like a yo-yo, a boomerang, a dog playing fetch, an adult that's still trying to perfect his childhood rep. The regret you have when you speak to your therapist and you know that you failed to apply the recommended steps. Your default is defense. Once you observe a glimpse of the behavior that you vowed to prevent, but you know you can't let it slip. Why? Because you from the hood. And you know if you let some of it slide, that drip becomes drenched and you rather keep it all bone dry. The walls you built are dense, deep, tall, and wide. Now who are you mad at, God? Devilish games played in the garden of the wise cause the untamed flames of rage to suffocate the flowers in your life. This is what trying to master your childhood complex looks like. But how do you uninstall a code that's been written so deeply into your soul? The hard work is internal and it's protected by the ego. The vulnerabilities that you never showed, the secrets that you never spoke. This courage you have is built on fears of old due to emotions you still don't know how to emote. And ultimately, the walls you built for your protection become a coffin for your lessons. The past is meant to provide you with perspective, not direction. Wishing
Mm.
upon a star for so long will have you sitting behind bars, a prisoner of your own perspective, robbing you of the gifts of the present and those that love you most of your presence. But I know you can't let go, so just hold, breathe. I want you to be still. Please find your peace. You are your beliefs. The past is nothing but a bedrock, a foundation you are not meant to defeat. It's nothing but a doormat for you to wipe your feet. Now listen to me. Obsession is a disease. Acceptance is the only vaccine. Now, can we please let go of childish things as we become the men I know God has us destined to be? And I won't charge you by the hour.
Wow.
Thank you.
You basically summarized everything that we're just saying now. You know that.
Yeah,
In that frame, everything.
it's a
And,
conversation that I don't mind having.
wow.
I enjoy it because I
Wow.
know where I was at a couple years ago.
Mm.
And my mother tell you very, very, very fast. She'll tell you this, who my son is now is not who he used to be.
Wow.
And I'm
Wow.
here for that. I'm okay. If I'm the same person I was at 16, at 41, there's a problem there. I need to evolve. Like I can
No,
still be funny. I can still have. I can still care about certain things. But listen, if because subscription, the courage is built on fears of old due to emotions you don't know how to emote. Like I needed to learn how to effectively express myself, to realize that anger is a secondary emotion and not the primary. And it's typically because I am embarrassed. I feel the need to, I don't feel valued. It's based on all of these other reasons,
wow.
not what I think is the principle of the argument.
Wow. You just gave us a free show. A free show. Because at some point I'm like, okay, where am I? That was, no, everyone that was here really appreciated that. That was amazing because you're able to put together such real facts and truths in a poetic form. That is so inspiring, honestly. You've simplified it. I think you should share it with all of us. Please share it with us. Write it down. No,
For
it's
sure, for sure.
because
Like,
you put it. That is the whole thing. Getting to a place where you realize that yes, your childhood does determine your adulthood, but once you become conscious, it loses its power. Once you become conscious and intentional,
Hmm.
the past suddenly loses its power over you. But as long as you're not conscious about it and you're not working on the things that you want to change, it remains a reality. It's not a past. It's not the past. It's your present, because
Yeah.
it's in your life, because you're not challenging it.
You
You
know,
are
and
not.
it's like that's a part that, like, when I said in the poem, uh, uh, it robs you of the gifts of the present and those that love you most of your presence. People don't realize how much those defensive responses and that aggressive behavior makes people not want to be around you. And you're not able to recognize the blessings that are currently in front of you. And trust me, whenever you take a pause and you just look around and you realize this is not a true threat to me, this isn't trying to hurt me,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
trying to get me to listen. It just wants me to understand, okay, well, now you get to approach it differently. And
Yeah.
now when you, and that allows you to be present in a way that you get to smell those roses instead of suffocating them.
Sure. But what you've done, because you were saying you went through therapy. Most Black people are not willing to go to therapy for different reasons. How did you get yourself to go to therapy? Was it something you decided, someone advised you? How did you get yourself? Because I mean, that is important, to get someone to help you process your emotions.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, people suggested it a lot since I
You're
was,
an
because
kid.
you got to remember, like, I was in the military before 9/11 happened. And then after 9/11, that entire experience changed dramatically. It went from, it felt more like a 9 to 5 job where I just learned about computers, to then being an instrument in a war machine. Very different situations, right?
Yeah.
So people have been suggesting I go to therapy since I was 20 years old, but you have to be in a position to receive. And it was right before the pandemic that I started looking at my relationship with my children, and I wanted it to be better. I felt like I was demonstrating some of my father's mistakes, and it was going to put distance between us, especially as they were coming up on their teenage years. I didn't want their teenage years to be cops and robbers. You know, me trying to figure out what they're doing wrong and then hold them accountable. Instead, let's have conversation, let's have a relationship, so that way I could assist you in that path.
Yeah.
And then my current fiance, she was on her own spiritual journey of healing, and she made the recommendation. And it was finally at that time, because I was recognizing it within myself, and I was so enamored with her, that I took the advice and started. And in that process, um, I think I did it for myself, because of her, because of my kids, because of all of these other external factors that I realized needed a better version of me.
Mm. Wow. I think you also mentioned that you must be willing to receive, because sometimes we want things to change, but we're not willing to receive the assistance. We hope somehow things will just change, and is probably due to that lack of understanding that nothing is going to change just because you're ready. Because if you were already programmed by your environment, because genetically, when we are all born, you come with a certain, set of genes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That will predict how you turn out, how you look, how you'll behave, and all of that. But the environment is more powerful than our genes. So meaning, even if you were born of a very difficult situation and traits that are not necessarily positive, if the environment changes around you, the chances of you producing more positive outcomes are higher, even if genetically you're carrying traits that were not positive.
There was one thing that in my journey that has helped me. Like I've always had good mentorship. That helps. And being on a path of forward progress helps, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So I remember being in the military, and this guy told me one time, he said, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. I said, what's the difference? He goes, a thermometer can tell you the temperature of the environment. A thermostat controls it. You want to control your environment. And I found myself one day getting to an argument, and I did my default defensive thing. I was like, "Yo, that's who I am. Take it or leave it. Love me
Yeah.
or leave me alone." And when you start getting on, when you start acting like that, and you hear yourself, "This is just who I am." No, you have control over who you are. And you determine if the person or whatever the reason is you're having this conversation is worth adjusting who you are. Do you
Yeah.
just accept everything that you was at 18 years old? No.
No.
You have to, being a product of your environment is an excuse used heavily by people that don't want to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand it,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I'm going to accept it.
Mm-hmm. Because remember, when you are a child, you don't have okay, Dr. Tembecker says be a thermostat, not a thermometer. She loved your comment. She
Oh,
loved that line. I think before we close, you have to give us one last poem. Okay. So I just wanted to say, when you are young, when you're a child, you can't control your environment. That's a fact because you're a baby. You don't have control. Then that environment produces the bigger you, the older version of you. But once you're older, you now have the control. You decide now what you're going to do with your environment. You have to embrace what your upbringing produced, and then you decide: is this what you want? Are you happy, or you want to change it? Now, if it's not working, you have to change it.
yeah.
But changing anything is a lot of work, like you're saying, and most of us are not willing to do the work. And you want to hold on to what has created you as if you don't have control of you changing things today.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, but that's what needs to be happening. So that's why some can just say, oh, but this is who I am. I grew up like this. In our culture, this is what we do. I mean, if your culture is not working, change it. If your culture
Hello.
is really
It just makes sense, but it's so hard. Again, that goes back to the poem. How do you uninstall a code that's been written so deeply into your soul? And the only way you could do that is by recognizing who the real enemy is. And I guarantee you, the real enemy is not the person that stepped on your shoes, the person that owes you money, the person that disrespected you. The real enemy is your ego.
you have to,
Once you give
yeah,
yourself the grace
yeah.
needed to heal, you'll see so many other issues resolve themselves.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna give you the choice.
Okay.
Which poem would you like to hear? Would you like to hear "I Am a Man," or would you like to hear "A Son with No Father"?
A son with no father.
Okay. "A Son with No Father" is a book with no author, a main character that's been developed by his peers and his barber. Lost in the pages, wondering if his features reflect that of the artist, but he can't tell, because tears blurry his vision that chased his birthday cake when he just needed to be watered. A son with no father is a plant with no light, a seed trying desperately to bud with all of its might, hoping to bloom in spite of the gloom that he faces every night when he just needed you there to read him a sweet lullaby. A son with no father is a player with no coach, a slave with no hope, a burning desire for freedom, but the longing for his daddy will only keep him dangling from that rope when he just needed you there to keep your promises. A son with no father is left with women that eat their young. They are forced to feed on that boy's masculinity until he thinks he's one of them. Lost in pop culture, trying to discover his identity with no place to learn it from when he just needed you, their king, to set the example. He needed that balance. That boy needs both of his parents. He deserved being abandoned. He did nothing to deserve being abandoned and would rather walk in his father's shadow. But in the man's absence, it's this little boy that has to be the one to cast it. His imagination holds the graphic of the perfect dad captured, a slave to an image that will never be mastered. There is no hand to craft it. There is no magic in rabbits. There's no one to show him how to hold the bat at baseball practice. Remember, you put your back elbow up and never take your eye off the ball. There's no one to show him how to throw his hands so he doesn't get his little ass kicked. Remember, always keep your guard up. You tuck your chin and you punch across the middle. There's no one to point out a good woman or the definition of what a good asset is. A good asset. Now for this, I would like to take a walk with you. No one to share an adventure and all things that are man-ish. Mommy can try her very best, but she can't be all the things that a man is. Her role is just as important to provide him with balance and order. But a son with no father is haunted by the thoughts of being fostered, hoping that he could protect his future son and daughter from all of the lessons that your absence taught him. Now, have you ever tried to read a book that's missing an introduction? No preface to prepare that youngin' for what's coming? Yet, the numbing effects of your absence creates a heartless dummy that walks around town with their 4 pound and finds everything funny. Now I don't think you do, money, because you failed to realize that a son with no father is much, much more than a book with no author or a boy with no dad. He is the Immaculate Conception. Why? Because he is a young God and he built himself. Painfully obvious that you are no man. A son with no father is looking for the words to complete his story in the absence of his author. Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
I'm going to put my website in a comment.
Yeah,
So that way, if anybody's interested in getting any merchandise or the book, they could get it directly.
I'll also add it on my. I'm going to post this live. I'll add your website there in case someone missed it now. I'll add it there also.
Thank you.
Wow. Someone says, Cookie says that the fruit of the. Okay, I missed that.
The fruit, you know, is you gotta water yourself to bear the fruit.
Okay, I didn't get that. Okay,
Yeah.
so your website is on. I'll also share it.
Thank you kindly.
I post this, but I think we need to do this again sometime. But we'll talk. This was amazing, like literally.
Thank you so much, Dr. BB. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to be sitting here having a conversation across the globe. You know what I'm saying? Like that matters.
Hello.
That matters. Being able to have these dialogues with people that we're all of the same tribe. I'll tell you that much. And a lot of times, colonialism has tried to convince us otherwise. But there's so much more strength in sharing our struggles with each other. We don't got to go anywhere else.
That's it. You know, this morning I posted a quote from Dr. Bruce Lipton. He says, community is immunity. Community is immunity. So Lady Damini says that was deep. You had me in tears. Honestly, I agree.
Thank you. I'm humbled and I appreciate that you guys listened.
That's amazing.
You know, for a very long time, I wrote poetry and I only shared it with myself and my inner circle. And about 7 years ago, I moved to Georgia, to Atlanta. And I realized that I started matching my experiences with lessons. And I felt like that's when my poetry became valuable enough to share. So anybody that sincerely listened, I appreciate it.
No, honestly, we actually appreciate you sharing your art, your gift, your heart, your mind. It's amazing. Dr. Tembeka says she sends a lot of 100% and all. And someone also said something, I just missed it, but to everyone who commented, thank you so much for making time. Mario, thank you so much. Definitely we're gonna keep in touch. We'll have another session. We can decide what we're gonna discuss. But what
I
I
actually
like
let's
about
set up
you,
another one when you get your book and you read it.
yeah, okay. So once I get my book,
We could do a book review.
yeah, we'll do a book review. We'll do a book review. That will be nice. And what I love about talking to you is while we're talking, you just go into a trance with poetry. Like, okay,
I'm weird like that.
that's actually amazing because you're giving us snippets of heaven on earth. Honestly,
Oh, that was sweet.
because
Thank you. That was beautiful.
honestly, we all enjoyed it. I'm sure we all enjoyed it. We appreciate it because, like you said at the beginning, God is actually speaking through all of us, trying to give
That's a
us an
fact.
idea of how he sees us, how he wants us to experience this whole thing, how he wants us to let go and hold on to certain things, let go of certain things. But you have to be willing to hear and see and taste him because he's everywhere
Amen.
within
I say.
everyone. So it's just about connecting to that level, that energy. And then you just see him everywhere, you touch him everywhere, you taste him everywhere. So thank you for
All right, you
being.
made me so happy. Dr. BB, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
Peace
so
and
much.
blessings, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Let me know when you get the book, all right?
I will. Look what I did. I did this. I don't even usually do this. Like, I'm fitting in.
All right, have a good night.
Say hi to your fiance and your kids.
Definitely will do.
Ciao.
All right,
Bye,
bye.
everyone. Bye.